John Frankenheimer called me up. Him and Raul Julia, who I have his photograph here. I've had it since he passed away. It's a very interesting and difficult story because it dealt with a situation that was true, you know, and Chico Mendez was the person whose life we were following, played by Raul Julia. Did a brilliant job. And I played a character that had actually trained him and helped him to get to the point of where he understood his life. And the story itself was about an ecologist who worked, he was an Indian, and worked out in the forests he was a rubber tapper, and that the world was infringing on the Amazon jungles and taking away not only their livelihood, but also destroying the Amazon. And so he was one of the great ecologists on the planet at that time. And he was killed and assassinated. And the sadness is that it was a situation that was very difficult to take place. And I'm going to go back a little bit before we actually started shooting to about 2 years, maybe even 3 years before we did the burning season. When Chico Mendes was killed, a lot of filmmakers went down to Brazil to try to help and try to bring the story to light. And there was one company that held the rights gotten from the wife, the last wife that he had. He had been married twice, and the second wife held the rights to the story. So they had, this production company in Brazil had gone and purchased the rights from her. So when the whole world, and I mean the whole world, filmmakers from all over the world came, Robert Redford and his film company came down, and they had bought the story from a magazine article, but wanted to get the rights also from the family to help the family and do this right. Paramount, Universal, Warner Brothers, Columbia, all had teams that had gone down there. And Bob Young, myself, who I'd been working with for many, many years, I went to talk to Jeff Katzenberg, and at Disney. At that time, he wasn't at Disney anymore. He was over at his DreamWorks. They had created that, and I walked in and I talked to Jeff, and I said, "Listen, Jeff, can we go down and do this piece? Because we have our own aesthetic. We have our own sense of documentation of human behavior. We're a good film crew. I'd just like to go try. Everybody's down there. Can you help us? Can you want to go with us? Can you give us the money to buy the rights?" He says, "Okay. Yeah, how much you gonna need?" I said, "I would probably need about at least $1 million." He says, "You got it. Go down there and buy it if you can get it," because he knew that it was gonna be tough. So we went down there. We became part of many, many people who went down to try to buy the rights from this production company. And of course, everybody put in their bid to do this piece of work. And we put in ours, saying, I have the cash. We're coming across with $1 million, and we're ready to work the deal out. And they knew about the ballad of Gregorio Cortez. And that weighed in very high with Brazil and this production company. They knew the film, and they knew the quality of the work, and they knew the artistic endeavor and the aesthetic and everything that went along with it. And it was a big piece of work, right? And there was about 3 companies left in the bidding, with us being one of them. We came in last, but we were now placed in the final cut of the companies, and one being ourselves, one being Redford, and a couple of other countries, one from England. And so we're there, and they finally make their decision. And we're all of us were in our own spaces. I mean, we hadn't seen any of the other people, but Bob and I were just walking around going, wow, I wonder if we'll be able to get it. We put a real good presentation, and we really put our word out there. We were really trying hard, and we had, Katzenberg and DreamWorks and the whole thing behind us. And they picked us. They were giving us the right to do the Chico Mendes story. It wasn't called The Burning Season then. It's just Chico Mendes. And out of all the people in the world, they had chosen us. And, so I was moved, and Bob was moved, and we were just in love with everybody. And we went to do the exchange. Okay, we met at the Naval Academy, like West Point, for Brazil, and a big table, and at the table were the 2 owners of the production company that had the rights, their wives, 3 other gentlemen who had been part of the producerships that had given them the money, and their wives, and Bob and myself. Bob sitting next to me. On this side, we're talking at the table. Now, we're so happy. Can't tell you, and everybody's just ecstatic. And I'm sitting there talking, and we're all talking. And I'm talking to the guy next to me, and he says, do you ride horses? I said, oh, yeah. Yeah, I like riding horses. He goes, you have to come to my ranch. I own one of the largest ranches here in Brazil. It's a cattle ranch. It's beautiful. You have to come up and partake with me and ride some of my horses. I said, oh, okay, I'd love to. And I'm sitting there, and I realize that the people that are sitting at the table are the people who had Chico Mendes killed. They were the cattle barons. And I turned to Bob. He didn't know. I didn't know at the time that this was what was going on. And I said, oh my God. I didn't know what to do. And the producers say, okay, we finished eating, and by this time now, I'm like completely holding on with everything I have. And Bob's sitting there, and he's happy, and he doesn't know that, And I said, okay. And he says, okay, we'll exchange. Do you have the check on you? And I said, yeah, but do you have the paperwork? And he goes, oh, yeah, I sure do. And he comes out with a stack of paper about this thick, all legal rights and everything, and he hands them to me. And I look at them, and I said, okay, here's the check. I said, now I have to take this back with me to show this to Disney's lawyers immediately, and we are in with you. We will send you the money. You'll have, and then they all shut up. Everybody went quiet. And I said, and Bob looks at me because he knows I have the check. And he says, why did you say that, Eddie? To himself. And I'm saying to myself, I got to get out of here. And I said, thank you very much. We're going to take this. I'll get back to you within less than 24 hours. You'll have the money. Everything is fine. They just have to go through this. You understand, right? The legal aspects of what we're talking about here. We need to make sure that everything is okay. And then and by this time, they're like really, and these guys are completely shut up now. The producers are not saying anything. They're just looking at me. And I'm looking at them, and I'm saying, no, this is legal. I need to get this. Okay, thank you, Bob, let's go. Bob's going, I said, get up, Bob, let's go. And so I grabbed the paperwork, and I said, thank you very much, everybody. Thank you very much. I stand up, and now they're really, really angry. You could feel the tension in the air. And I go, come on, Bob, let's go. And we get in, and we start to leave. I said, let's get the hell out of here, Bobby, let's go. And he goes, what's going on, Eddie? What are you doing? I said, let's go, Bobby. And so I grab the paperwork. I go running to a taxi, and I jump in the taxi with our luggage, and I jump in there, and once we're in, and they take off, and I didn't turn around. I didn't want to know anything, and I'm rushing to the airport. I said, "Let's get out of here, Bobby." And then I go, and he goes, "What is it?" He goes, "Those are the cattle barons. Those are the guys who actually had Chico Mendez killed." So, what? I said, "I don't know what to tell you, man, but this is what's going on here right now. We got to get out of here." And so I grabbed the paperwork. I come back in. We fly into the airport. We land at LAX. I go straight over to Jeff Katzenberg. And I say to Jeff, I bust in the office. I said, "Jeff, we got it." So, "Oh, fantastic." I said, "Here it is. This is it." I said, "Here's your check. You have the rights there. You have everything to do. Bob and I are not going to do it." And he goes, "What are you talking about?" I said, "The people who own this were the people who were participated in having him killed." He said, "What?" I go, "Yeah, these are the cattle barons. These are the people who were the people responsible. The number one cattle baron in the country was sitting right next to me." He says, "Oh," he grabs the check and he goes, psh, psh, psh. He calls the secretary and says, "Send all this stuff back, please, and tell him thank you very much." I turned to Jeff and I said, "Jeff, you have the highest integrity of any person I've met in this industry. From this day forth, Jeffrey Katzenberg, I will forever remember this moment in time." And Bob and I left. A couple of years later, I get a phone call from Frankenheimer, and the guys had lost the rights, and so they now went through something else. I don't know how they got it, but they're calling me up, and I said, "Oh boy, if you guys only knew." I didn't tell them anything. It's the first time I really told a story for anybody. And but I was so honored to be asked to perform in this piece. And Frankenheimer was brilliant. He did a great job. And Raul Julia was it was his final dramatic piece for Raul. He was very sick. He had cancer. And it was one of his final performances, and it was beautiful. And I won a lot of praise. So did he. We both won Golden Globes. And it was quite an experience, to say the least. That piece of work, and it still holds pretty strong. It holds up.